After all those years of Tom Coughlin, 2015 marked the end of the Tom Coughlin era. And while some Giants fans were kind of on the fence with this, I thought, in terms of some people were really okay with Coughlin leaving, and other people thought, who else are you going to bring in that's better? Sometimes be careful for what you wish for because you just might get it. Well, ultimately, 2016 showed that there was life after Tom Coughlin. There was a future after Tom Coughlin. And in fact, I think in some small parts, at least because Tom Coughlin is now gone, the Giants are closer to being a contender than they would have been if you still had Tom in the picture. That's the simple reality, especially based off of what you saw in 2016. And it's interesting with that 2016 team because typically I'm not a fan of teams investing a lot in free agency because in general those moves just usually don't work out. But the Giants in 2016 and even before that had invested a little bit bigger in free agency, I think in part because their drafting over recent years hadn't been that spectacular. But the free agents they brought in for 2016 really paid dividends. I mean, you look at Snacks Harrison in the middle. He was a force as a run stuffer. Olivier Vernon outside at the defensive end position. He had a good season. You had JPP, not a free agent, mind you, but I thought he played better in 2016, I guess, learning how to play with a club. Then you bring in Janoris Jenkins, and he had a really, really good season. So you looked at this Giants team, and all of a sudden, very quickly, mind you, with an offensive-minded head coach now in Ben McAdoo, that had darn near as good of a complete, well-rounded, balanced defense as they had at any point in time during the Tom Coughlin era. It's just crazy how that worked out. Every major free agent signing that the Giants made before 2016, I think really paid dividends in their own way with Harrison, Vernon, Jenkins. I'm telling you. And then you get a Defensive Player of the Year type of season out of Landon Collins. He was just incredible last year. Just absolute force. He made plays all over the place against the run, as a safety against the pass. He was everywhere. He was a difference maker and a real legit Defensive Player of the Year type of season for him. So the Giants, it was funny, you got to a point where you're getting ready to get into the playoffs, and a lot of people had designs on this team going to the Super Bowl. Because it felt like one of those old Giants teams of the past where they got hot at the right time, had a really, really good defense, and maybe the thought was Eli will figure something out and get just hot enough to make just enough big throws and enough big plays at the right time that this team could really cause some damage. And ultimately that didn't happen. They kind of got housed, actually, by the Packers in Lambeau in the wild card round. And, you know, as a general rule, when you give up a Hail Mary before halftime, you have a feeling it's probably not going to be your day. So while the Giants had a good kind of bounce back season in 2016 and made some progress and showed well for themselves, it probably was a bit of a disappointing finish because as the season went along, there started to be more and more expectations that this team could really do something. But the fact is I don't think they were quite ready yet. And now we have to see in 2017 if they are actually ready, because the fact is with Eli Manning in the fold, you have a limited window based off of the construction of this team to really truly contend and be viable. And I think that's in part because Eli Manning only has a certain amount of time to be viable as an NFL starting quarterback. So it's kind of put up or shut up time for the New York Giants here in 2017. So I'm not surprised that they went out and got Brandon Marshall in free agency after he was released by the Jets. And you think about it. Now you're looking at a receiving corps that already had OBJ. You already have Odell Beckham Jr., arguably the most explosive outside threat in the National Football League. Now you bring in a guy that's been a number one wide receiver for years in Brandon Marshall. And really, I think, honestly, for the first time in his entire career, Brandon Marshall's coming in, and he's the established number two guy. He doesn't even have to be that dude. He just has to be a guy, to which he typically always is a really, really good guy on the field. He doesn't even have to be the number one guy. That's crazy how it works out. And in certain cases, the rich get richer. And when you already have Odell Beckham Jr., you can add a guy that's been a number one wide receiver for so many years, put up some big numbers like Brandon Marshall as your number two. You would think that that will lead to some improvement on the offensive side of the ball. And when you look at this team heading into 2017, you wonder if this is their time or not. because ultimately you have that really, really strong defense. While their linebacking core I still think is a little soft and a little questionable, when you have that defensive front that they have that plays so well both against the run and the pass, you can kind of mask that. And then when you've got a secondary that has the talent that it does, with Janoris Jenkins and Landon Collins, Eli Apple, I thought he acquitted himself relatively well in year one when a lot of Giants fans weren't even happy about him being drafted at pick 10 because they had designs on Leonard Floyd or Jack Conklin and felt like, ooh, this was a loser's consolation prize. Maybe not. And then you've got guys like DRC aren't even one of your top two corners. You've got talent and depth in that secondary, so it can kind of mask any potential deficiencies in the linebacking core. The point is, this is a really good defense, and on paper appears to be a good defense in 2017, and with another year together, may potentially be even better, especially if you factor in the continued development of somebody like an Eli Apple. This defense could get better. Now, is it reasonable, realistic to expect another Defensive Player of the Year type of season out of Landon Collins? I don't know, but wouldn't expect a big step back. I would still expect him to play like a stud. So this defense, it should be able to keep the Giants in a lot of games. This defense should win quite a few games for the Giants this year. And then offensively, you have a nice set of receivers. I already mentioned Odell Beckham Jr. I already mentioned Brandon Marshall. I thought Sterling Shepard showed an occasional flash as a rookie, a second-round pick out of Oklahoma last year. Now you're bringing him into a situation this year where he's only going to have to be the slot guy. He will be the third option. It could open up things for him. Now you're talking about a wide receiver core last year that I thought was maybe 1.5 deep is probably going to legitimately be 3 deep. And if you get absolutely anything on a first-round pick, Evan Ingram, now you've got another explosive, speedy type of option in the passing game. The Giants could be a problem to defend in said passing game. There's definitely a lot of potential there with the receiving talent that is there for New England. For New York, not New England. With that said, you have to be concerned about the offensive line. Eric Flowers, a former first-round pick out of Miami, guy they took 9th overall in 2015, frankly has been terrible, a complete dud bust at left tackle. He's given up the most pressures per game over the past 2 years out of any left tackle in the NFL. And when you already have a less than mobile Eli Manning, it makes it really hard for him to stay upright, to succeed, and make the best decisions and the best throws possible when he's consistently under duress, which you see happen a lot. Then you look at the lack of true depth and balance on the offense in terms of the running game. They really need to find some type of identity in their ability to run the football. Because when you go back to the Giants teams under Coughlin that did win the Super Bowl, while you had a defensive front that could put some pressure on Tom Brady, meaning you didn't have to blitz a ton because you could bring 4 guys and legitimately get heat, or maybe if you did blitz, you would still only bring 5 guys. Offensively, when you think about guys like Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw, you had kind of a thunder and lightning tandem in the backfield that, while not spectacular on their own, as a group, as a duo, as a unit, could balance out the Giants' offense, could provide some type of identity and production on the ground. And I don't know if you're going to get that out of the Giants this year or not. You could, and they really need it. Because I also have concerns about Eli Manning. He's a guy in his mid-30s now. I don't ever think he's been the greatest of quarterbacks, frankly. And I've said before, and I stand by it, someday he will get into the Hall of Fame because he's put up some numbers, and ultimately he's won 2 rings, and those 2 rings came at the expense of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. But I always feel like, in terms of the hierarchy of Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and you have the guys up at the top, the next level, the next level, the next level, at the very, very bottom tier of that list is going to be somebody like an Eli Manning, similar to a Bob Greasy. Guys that won a couple of rings, but nobody really thinks of them as truly great, dominant, elite quarterbacks. And Giants fans know what I'm talking about when it comes to Eli. He's done some good and wonderful things, but he has those moments where you just get so freaking frustrated with him because you wonder, how many more times can you overthrow a guy on a 3-yard screen pass by 5 yards? How many more times can you throw a ball on a slant pattern at a guy's feet or 10 feet over his head? And sometimes when you watch Eli, it is so incredibly frustrating. And I thought in 2016, at sporadic pockets and moments, I started to see a quarterback that was really on the decline. So that's why it's going to be even more important in 2017 because he's not getting any younger. And he, in my opinion, is not going to get better. At best, he's going to be what he has been. At worst, he's going to be worse than that. The offensive line must improve in front of him, and the running game must improve with him as well, so that way it can help balance out the offense, and it'll also open up things for those talented receivers you've got on the outside. In terms of X factors or players to watch, I look offensively, Paul Perkins. He was your 5th-round pick last year out of UCLA. I love this kid coming out of college. I think even though he didn't show a ton last year, and frankly didn't show a ton in the preseason, there was that occasional flash, that occasional blip on the radar that made you think that this guy could have some potential and possibility. Well, he needs to step up and show that he could be a lead feature back for this team, that he could be a 3-down back. Defensively, I look at B.J. Goodson, the linebacker from Clemson that they took last year in the 4th round. For so long, the Giants have criminally neglected the linebacker position, both inside and outside, in the NFL draft for reasons that are unbeknownst to me. Apparently, the organization just doesn't value the position that much. So when they do invest some type of draft pick in a kid, especially a kid that I kind of like Goodson coming out of Clemson, they need him to be a bit of a presence on the inside of that defense. Because if you could get better play out of your linebackers, it just takes that whole defense to another level. When I look at the schedule for this team, I think it's going to be important for them to get off to a good start, and their early schedule is not great. All 4 opponents that they face are viable, legitimate, playoff caliber teams. They got to go to Dallas week 1, then they host Detroit week 2, to go to Philadelphia week 3, and to Tampa Bay week 4. So 3 of your first 4 on the road, 4 games against teams that all could have a chance at the playoffs this year. The Giants need to make sure that they don't fall flat on their face out of the gate. And then you look at it in the middle portion of the season. Now, granted, maybe one of these games is in London. I don't really know. I didn't bother to look, I'll be honest. But weeks 9 through 12, you've got the Rams, you got the 49ers, you got the Chiefs, you got the Redskins. That's a big stretch of games that are all home games. So you have to make some hay there, especially since it's the Rams and the 49ers and, the Redskins, so it's a divisional game, and then you throw Kansas City in there. This is an opportunity for them to potentially make up some hay, especially if they do struggle early on in the season. I look at this Giants team, though, and I see a team that has a lot of offensive talent on the outside, with questions on the offensive line, the running game, some questions to me about their quarterback, and a defense that is really, really good. I don't know if it's going to be much different than last year. I think this is a team that will go 10-6, finish second in the NFC East. They'll battle and contend, I think, with the Cowboys all year, and I would anticipate this divisional race to be much tighter than it was last year. And for the Giants standpoint, this is the team that beat the Cowboys twice last year. Close fashion, yes, but they did it. So they have the recipe, they have the formula, they have a little bit of the competitive edge. But I don't know that they got so much better, or that things pan out to where they will automatically be so much better from a record standpoint. I think they'll be 10-6. They'll make the playoffs as a wild card team, and then we'll see how people feel about them come playoff time.